Kia ora koutou. Welcome to the Wellington Candidates Facebook Live. So we have here with me Ben Wylie-van Eerd, our Hutt Valley candidate, Abe Gray, who is our Wellington Central candidate, and of course Jessica Hammond, who is our Ōhāriu candidate. And myself, Geoff, I'm standing in Rongotai. So what we're going to do is we're just going to let the candidates introduce themselves for a minute or a couple of minutes, and then we're going to have a brief discussion about the issues we see confronting Wellington in this election, and then we do have people in on our Zoom call who will be asking us questions directly. So that's the kind of running order of things. So why don't we have Ben, do you want to introduce yourself to start with?
Yeah, thank you, Geoff. So for those of you who don't know me, I am Ben Wylie-van Eerd. I am the Hutt South candidate for the Opportunities Party. So I'm over there across the harbour and taking on Chris Bishop and Ginny Anderson and having a great time. Actually, we've just had our first Meet the Candidates evenings and they're a blast. I am a scientist. I'm 33 years old. And I have had some experience working overseas, have had some experience working in New Zealand, and a few years ago decided to come back to New Zealand, settle here, and this is where I wanted to build the rest of my life because I really love New Zealand. It's my home. It's the place where I feel most connected. And the reason I got involved in politics is because I sort of, I noticed that there were these big problems in New Zealand that we were having decades-long records of not really getting on top of, and it's something that I started to notice in my university days, somewhere between undergrad and postgrad. I sort of realized that there's all these problems going on that I can't exactly invent something or discover something that would fix them because they sort of sit outside the realm of technology and science and innovation and these kinds of things. They sit more in the realm of how we relate to one another and how we make decisions that are going to affect us all. And well, I thought, well, I have to get involved in politics then, or at least that this is one way of getting involved in that whole system of making better decisions as a nation and as a group of people. So that's why I joined TOP. That's why I am running. And it's a pleasure to meet you all today. I'm looking forward to all your questions.
Fantastic, Ben. Thanks, Ben. So let's hear from Jessica.
Kia ora tātou. I'm Jessica Hammond. I'm standing in Ōhāriu for the Opportunities Party for the second time. I was born in Wellington, grew up in Wilton. I'm the fourth of 5 children. And I'm a public servant. I've been worked in public policy for about, 15, 17 years or something like that. I have 2 daughters. They're 11 and 9. I'm into theatre, community theatre, and running and being outside and doing cross stitch and watching Netflix and reading books, and I'm kind of into politics. It's something that I've kind of been interested in watching from the sidelines for a long time. Being a public servant, I've been advising ministers for a long time, and that's good. That work has meaning, and I can make a difference through my work as a public servant. However, I can only make a difference within the bounds of what our current parties and our current ministers allow. And what they allow is generally tinkering. And, that's not enough for me. I think we can do better, and I think we should do better. I think we need to demand better. So I don't feel like the parties that are in Parliament now are going to do anything but tinker unless we make them. So as much as I like my day job, and I think I am doing quite good, useful work, I think that I can make a bigger difference on the other side of government from the one I'm in now. So that's why I'm with the Opportunities Party. I couldn't stand for, people do ask me sometimes, well, if you want to be in Parliament, why aren't you with another party? And I guess I would say, I don't want to be in Parliament for the sake of being in Parliament. I want to be in Parliament to do the kinds of things that the people who are the parties that are in Parliament just don't seem to have any interest in doing, like actually fundamentally fixing our long-standing problems. So that's why I'm with TOP, because we know how to fix things, and we are going to, if with your support, we will.
Kia ora, Jess. Couldn't have said it better myself. And so last but certainly not least, coming at you from my lounge, I'm in the office of my house, and Abe is in my lounge, because we're going to do a Facebook Live Ask Me Anything on cannabis after this. So to ease that transition, Abe's come around already. And Abe Gray, standing in Wellington Central. Kia ora, mate.
Yeah. Hey, how's it going? Yes, I am Abe, not Geoff, as it says in the Zoom caption there. And I am standing in Wellington Central. I only just moved to Wellington. I was the candidate for the Opportunities Party in Dunedin North last election, and I've lived in New Zealand for 18 years, almost all of that time spent in Dunedin, and I'm a botanist and kind of made a name for myself as a cannabis activist in Dunedin, including founding New Zealand's first and only cannabis museum. And I had planned to actually move my business, the Cannabis Museum, into the Wellington Central electorate this year. And of course, tourism businesses and public events and community gatherings have kind of all been on the back burner since right about when I was about to do that. So I don't have the footprint that I had expected to have in Wellington Central by this time, but I hope to in the very near future. And I'm passionate about Wellington as a place, and Wellington Central as a place to do business and express cannabis enthusiasm. So much like the other two candidates, I think the Opportunities Party, is unique because we're very groundbreaking, and we're definitely not trying to promote the status quo. It's transformational change, something this generation is kind of expecting, but the other generations expected it, and they're 70-year-old baby boomers now. So it's kind of, you have to actually do it. You can't just cross your fingers and hope for someone else to do it. And that's what the Opportunities Party is here for. And if we can get into Parliament, we will do it. So that's all I'll say for now, but feel free to ask me any questions as well.
Bye, thanks, Abe. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Geoff. I'm the leader of TOP, and I am an economist. So that's what I've done in previous lives. I've been a researcher, run my own business, worked in the public service, much as Jess has done, working on solutions to New Zealand's biggest problems, and got frustrated by having, career politicians kick those solutions down the road because as Jess said, they would rather tinker with the status quo rather than really deal with fundamental change. So I mean, I'm keen to hear from each of you what you think the biggest issues are in the 2020 election, and I'll start by sort of setting out what the reason I decided to run in Rongotai. I actually live on the border of Wellington Central and Rongotai, so I could reasonably have chosen either electorate. But I mean, the thing that really struck me about Rongotai is that I really do feel like Labour have taken it for granted. Paul Eagle is the MP there, and he has despite the Labour Party talking a good talk on housing, and on transport, Paul Eagle has at every opportunity opposed cycleways and dragged his feet on the sort of medium density development that we're going to need to be able to house the 80,000 people that are expected to live in Wellington over the next 30 years. We're going to need to build up and particularly build up around our public and active transport networks. We're going to need people to use their feet, to use cycles or scooters or electric bikes or public transport, because there's not enough room for 80,000 cars in Wellington. So to me, that kind of housing and transport urban development issue is a massive one in this area, and that's why I chose to stand in Rongotai, because I really believe Paul Eagle has been a roadblock on that particular issue. So yeah, I mean, keen to hear from the other candidates what they see as their big local issues.
All right, we're sticking with the same order then. Is it me next?
Yeah, go for it, Ben. Yeah.
So for me, it's just 100% housing. I think that's the biggest issue, probably in just about every electorate in the country, and it certainly is the biggest issue in Hutt South. I think we've really gotten used to a really bad situation around housing in New Zealand. If you compare what the price of our housing is to housing in other places, the mind boggles. People think of it as an issue mostly for poor people, which, and it does impact significantly on the less well off, to the point where we've got people living in cars now, which is disgraceful. But, even if you're doing relatively well, imagine how much different your life might have been if you'd paid a third less for your house. If I'd paid something around $450,000 for the house that I've got, I'd have something like $200,000, $300,000. I could have made a big extension on it. I could have made it a much nicer house. I could be having an extra, $3,000, $4,000 a year to just have fun and buy appliances or go on overseas holidays. I mean, present COVID times accepted, but go and see the cool stuff that New Zealand has to offer in our backyard. And I don't think people have really internalized the idea that that's a better life. That's a better life than the one where I paid $750,000 for my house and I don't get to have all those other things. So it applies to people who are better off as well. And of course, it hits us in our business access to capital as well, because anybody who's got money in New Zealand, they put it in a house. And why not? The government is practically giving you money to put your money in housing compared to putting it in a productive business. But housing doesn't generate us any exports. It doesn't generate, more productive jobs. It doesn't allow us to work less and have a better quality of life or work-life balance. So choosing to keep protecting the land values of the people who currently own property at the expense of the entire country is just nuts to me. And I want to do something about that. And not a single party in Parliament is going to do that, which is why I'm running for top.
Kia ora.
I'll try not to cover too much of the same ground, but it's kind of the same answer. It's poverty, and in New Zealand, poverty means housing. In Ōhāriu, the sort of the northern suburbs where I live, we have several suburbs where the average house price is over $1 million. That's really just bananas. This is the second house I have had. Believe me, we didn't pay $1 million for our first house, but our capital gains unearned have been ridiculous. So my the house I'm in right now has earned more over about the last 5 years than I have, which is it's madness, and it's at the expense of younger people and of future generations. And the thing that really gets me out of bed in the morning to do this mahi is child poverty, which we do have in Ōhāriu, despite it being the wealthiest electorate, partly because, the people who do live here have really, really expensive housing, but also there is diversity within our electorate. And when I think about people with children just like mine who are not able to fulfill their potential, that makes me really, really upset and really, really angry. And I think it is I think there's a moral obligation to do something about it, but also it's really, really stupid to, to have just to have all this wasted potential when we could have all of these hundreds of thousands of children growing up to be massive contributors to community, society, and economy. It's sad, and it's wasteful, and it's a tragedy, and I want to fix it.
Good, Jess. Abe.
Hey, well, yeah, let me just say, I definitely agree with everything that's been said so far. And, so many of TOP's core principles affect the entire country, not just Wellington. That transformational change that's needed is needed in Wellington Central, it's needed in Rongotai, it's needed in Ōhāriu, it's needed in Hutt South, it's needed in every electorate in the country. But yeah, like I said, I'm a recent immigrant to Wellington. And I guess the things that I've noticed in Wellington Central, trying to set up a business, is just the situation with commercial property. The sort of general inflation that was spoken about just now with house prices applies to commercial properties as well. But there's also the whole earthquake situation. And I don't know that I necessarily have an easy answer to that, but, there's got to be something better than half of the entire city shuttered with no sort of end in sight, and many major, amenities that you would sort of take for granted in a major city not there because of this singular issue. So I don't know if that means we just need to have a big spend up, as we're, is okay to do now for important issues, and just fix it, or we need to be a little bit more relaxed about risk. But that, to me, that seems like something that needs to be tackled head on. And I guess also in the top cannabis policy, as a lot of people know, I have to take the opportunity to talk about cannabis, of course. Our policy in 2017 is the policy that everybody's now voting yes or no on. So we should pat ourselves on the back for that. That's why I came to TOP originally. So now we've had to kind of work beyond that, because everybody agrees with us on that now. So our specific policy now is more about how can we make that better. And part of that involves allowing local authorities a bit more control over the outlet density and opening hours, and essentially giving local government a say in the whole licensing chain for recreational cannabis should the referendum be successful. And I think that represents a really good opportunity for Wellington, because we're already known for our hospitality scene and our cafe culture. And I guess the referendum legislation as it stands now is quite restrictive on all of that stuff. And, I think for the purposes of the referendum, it's good that we have something that is a compromise for everybody in the country that we can all be comfortable and vote yes on. But when it comes to tweaking it and fine tuning it through select committee, if we can bring in some local control provisions, that means places that are a bit more uptight about it, I'm not going to name any names, they can have less of it visible. And then we don't have to, find the lowest common denominator for the entire country. And places like Wellington Central, and all of Wellington, or, I guess it might be different in Hutt with the different council, but at least, here with the Wellington City Council, we could, we'd have a good chance at having a bit more liberal visibility, because as a community, we've decided we can handle that. So I think that could be a good thing.
Yeah, and just to, it's interesting that point you raise, Abe, about the earthquake issues. Obviously, earthquakes and sea level rise both are a pretty big issue down in central Wellington, and that is one of the drivers of the council trying to push more development to the likes of Newtown or up to Johnsonville, where Jessica is. and you know, those areas are more stable from an earthquake, you know, standpoint. But that's all the more reason why we need to allow more development in those sort of suburban areas. But like I mentioned before, some you know, some people, and it's not just from the right, it's, you know, from the left as well. Some people are opposing that sort of development, which is a bit of a shame. Ben or Jess, have you any thoughts on that insurance issue?
Yeah, I mean, it's, man, we have to deal with it now, right? Because I think whenever I hear someone say that they're, you know, friends thinking about, because they can't afford standalone houses, that they're going to buy apartments in the city, I just think, oh, you know, are you going to be able to insure that soon? And it's something we need to start seriously talking about. I know, Ben, it's a big area in Hutt South as well, with Petone and things as well, like the managed retreat. With all of these things, the more we put them off, the more costly they're going to be for younger people in the future. So let's get on with it now. But I'm excited, as you know, in one of the areas of Wellington that is going to be growing, that for the potential for planning for that growth and having local amenities and being able to do more in my local area, and having that that concept of the 15-minute city where you can get everything walking, cycling, or on public transport within 15 minutes. I love hanging out in my community, and I'd love to be able to do more things locally. It's
just got to sort out that mall, Jess.
Yeah. Oh, you betcha, Geoff. I'm right on it.
Ben.
Yeah, I'm not really sure I have anything to add. It's yeah, certainly climate change is something that I worry about in terms of Petone. It's a fairly low-lying area. We know that it's a risk of flooding. Even before we start looking at sea level rises, we are going to start worrying about the floods that come along the Waikato stream and along the Hutt River. And yeah, not an easy thing to talk about, but it does mean changing where we live to a certain extent. And it's a conversation we're going to have. But blocking development is not going to help us adapt to climate change. It's not going to help us adapt to our earthquake risk. We sort of need to make changes, and as long as the land prices are very high and development is hard, it's going to be very difficult for us to do that. So yeah, fix housing.
Yeah. Cool. Okay, so I think we're just about ready to start taking questions, team. What do you think?
Can I just say, Abe, I love how echoey your microphone is. It sounds like you're about to launch into some kind of like karaoke pop song. You reckon maybe you can give us one later tonight?
There might be an echo knob on that microphone.
Oh yeah, the echo knob is. How is it now? Is it better now, or
it's so much better, Abe? I love it.
I'll turn it off for now. We'll save that for the cannabis one. That's Geoff's gimmick.
I didn't realize I'd left that on. Sorry about that. Okay, so Holly, do you wanna allow some of the people in the Zoom call to ask some questions or read some out?
Yeah, thank you very much, Geoff. So we've got Aaron asking the first question. Give me 1 second and unmute him.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, hi. So this one is you haven't really written a policy on it, but I want to hear what Geoff has to say. So big tech companies like Google and Amazon have repeatedly come under fire for fencing off their data. The picture that's beginning to emerge is that data is becoming a new driver of wealth inequality and therefore power inequality. Much like when land was democratized after the feudal era, should data be democratized to remedy this power imbalance? What's your position?
Yeah, and happy to hear from other candidates if you've got views on this too. I mean, yes, we sort of ran out of time to develop a digital policy, but this is one thing that I wanted to research, and I'm a big fan of the work that Andrew Yang did in this area, and certainly interested in his proposals and some of the regulation that's come in Europe on this sort of stuff. I do think we need to be looking at a future where where people do own their own data and can decide whether they want to, whether they want to sell that data for in return for certain things, or whether they want to hold on to that. And so I think we're going to need to move to a future where we unbundle a lot of these services. Currently there's some free services that are given away in exchange for data, and I think we're going to need to unbundle that so that people have the right to keep their data, and certainly if they stop using a service, that that data should stop being used by those companies. So I think there's a lot of work to do in that area, but I agree with the general proposition of what you're saying, that we need to democratize it. Basically, people should own their own data.
Awesome, thank you.
Any thoughts there, Ben or Jess or Abe?
Well, yeah, I haven't really looked into this very much either, so happy to wait for the data and the research to be done. But yeah, I really just hate that attention has become money, and that people are trying to buy every second of your attention away from you. Where's the room to enjoy your community and enjoy the place where you live and the people you live with? It's being bought away from us, and I hate it.
I mean, I have to endorse everything you said, Geoff. I mean, I myself go on Facebook once every 3 years when there's an election, basically, because I'm required to do so for campaigning purposes. But there's so many other ways, that we're forced to give up our data sovereignty, and we've got to get a handle on that. I mean, we're starting to see now what the long-term consequences of that are, and it's not pretty. And it was harder to understand initially, but now that we know, we have to do something about it, legislate about it. I mean, at a national level, it's hard when you're dealing with these multinational companies. And I guess New Zealand is known for its tech innovation, and we've got some pretty heavy hitters and strategic opportunities. We do need to increase the bandwidth to New Zealand. We need to get some cables going in and out in different directions to have some more redundancy in the system, and our sort of location as a potential, site for tech investment, data centers, all the extra energy coming off TY, closing down, all of that stuff. We do need to think about, but it means that we can kind of be a player, and we don't need to just roll over and say, well, this is how it is. Because we have sovereignty, within our borders, we can set some conditions, and we should have a conversation about that. We need to be facilitating a national conversation about that. That might be the thing that I do after we win cannabis, because I was looking through some old articles and I was reminded, I'd totally forgotten this when I give my political lineage and history in New Zealand, of my brief involvement in between stints with the ALCP with the New Zealand Pirate Party, which isn't around anymore. So yeah, I've thought about this for a long time.
Nice.
In my life as a public servant, I actually used to work on research data reuse. And in that space, what we're trying to do is say, well, and Ben, I bet as a scientist, you know about this, that, if your research is publicly funded, then that data should be available to everybody to reuse, and you can massively increase the value of the publicly funded research you've done. And I have no idea how this kind of concept would apply to social media data, but would it be, and I'm really just thinking off the top of my head, but instead of closing it all in, obviously your private data has to be private, but could we instead say, okay, there's sort of like common data that's anonymized and can be used for the good of everybody, that if you're going to be taking data from members of the public, then it's for the public good?
Yeah, that's the open government type idea, which
Yeah.
is slowly taking on.
But if there's stuff that's sort of like, you know, your information about you, we really need to rethink it, you know, as something that belongs to the individual, like a property right. And, you know, like, and then it'd be like organ donation. If you want to donate your data to science or whatever, go for it. But you don't, you know, have a too long to read end user license agreement that you're just like, let me use the service, I don't care. We've got to get on top of that.
Nice. Holly, another question?
Great points. So there's a Wellington specific question here from Anne. There's a distinct lack of vision with respect to transport in Wellington. Get Wellington moving was deeply disappointing in that regard. How did the candidates feel?
Yeah, I mean, totally agree there. And I mean, part of the problem is that we seem to, when we're having conversations about this stuff with the public, we seem to the bodies such as Get Wellington Moving, which was a collaboration between the council and NZTA, they seem to assume that the public is stupid and can't make trade-offs, because they gave 4 options: a really, really cheap option right through to a really expensive gold-plated option. And then they consulted on these 4 options. And of course, the public chose the most expensive option. And then the government said, well, we're not prepared to fund the most expensive option. And so then the local council said, well, we can't afford to fund the most expensive option. So then they started backtracking on all, and, you know, it's just a mess. What we should be doing, I think, is rather than the government trying to pick winners politically, with National saying they want to build, the Mount Vic tunnel, and Labor saying they'll do the same, but a few years later, National government tries to interfere in all of this stuff. Why not just say, okay, Wellington, here's $2 billion or whatever. This is how much we're prepared to spend on Wellington. You guys work out how you want to spend it. And then we can actually have a meaningful conversation about which projects we want to do first. That's what frustrates me, but I know Jess knows a lot more about this stuff than I do.
It drives me absolutely up the wall how. So sorry, just briefly, we used to have a situation in New Zealand where there was just a massive problem with pork barrel politics. So people, political parties could put a fancy bridge or a road or whatever in a marginal electorate, and have a train station right up to your big, outside your big funder's house, or whatever the hell they could do. It's basically vote buying, or not putting projects in the opposition's areas. So they decided that it was a good idea to make these decisions independent, so that you could look at projects across the country and say what is going to have the biggest benefit. And that I think was working pretty well. It's not perfect, but basically you can just fund the stuff that is going to give the most benefit for New Zealanders. And the government was able to say, look, the things we care about are accessibility for children and older people and people with disabilities, and we care about reducing carbon emissions, and we care about the economy. But within that, independent transport funding board, alongside local authorities, decide what is going to best meet your needs. And that was great. And so the politicians, to their credit, voluntarily gave up that power because they knew they couldn't be trusted with it. But then after they gave up that power, they seemed to say, oh, but we actually quite liked the buying votes thing. So over quite a few years, they've found lots of different ways to be able to make it kind of look like they do still have this independent thing, and they do for a lot of stuff, but find other ways to get around it. So they will do things with Crown contributions, which basically means there are projects that National and Labour know are not good enough to get to pass the muster of the New Zealand Transport Authority board. So they just buy the votes outside that process. And they will promise, and this is happening in both Ben and my electorates, the national candidates are both promising the same road, which may or may not be a good road, but there hasn't been there is no current business case for it. So they are saying, we promise this road because we think it's awesome. They have no idea. And it's going to cost almost $1 billion. It infuriates me. And they try and tell us they try and tell us that they are the responsible, managers of the economy. Give me a break. Seriously. Sorry.
I'm new to Wellington, but just in my short experience here, there seems to be like a really inconveniently located, like big flat circular field, which I'm not sure what it's for. If they could just pave that over, I think we'd be fine. But joking.
That might not be a popular position in Wellington Central.
Just jokes.
Classic.
Yeah, I really hate the way that central government has got local government over a barrel on this stuff. Local government's got plenty of ideas of how they'd like to spend this money, but they can't. They're prevented from effectively going out and doing those things, because for anything of any significance, they have to go begging to the government to fund it. They have to go begging to central government. So I really like TOP's promise to do more to increase local government funding and give back to local governments some of the decisions around this stuff that have been sitting with, New Zealand National Parliament in a way which I think is quite inappropriate and not helpful to getting people to take part in their local democracy either.
Kia ora. We've got about 5 or 6 minutes left, I think.
We've
Holly?
got plenty of questions, Ben. Geoff, one for Ben. As MP for Hutt South, would you support development of the Mealing intersection?
Yeah, I would be able to support the development of the Melling intersection. Everybody seems to be in agreement on that one. I have to say I have not gone out and personally looked at the business case, so I reserve the right to change my mind if I do and it turns out to have a 0.5 benefit cost ratio or something like that. But there's a lot of broad support for the Melling interchange, and there certainly is a lot of problems with traffic in the Hutt, particularly going along State Highway 2. And Melling is the sort of the epicenter of that at the moment. It does also contribute to resilience in case of flooding events, the way that they've worked it into the project. So it seems to have a lot of good stuff going for it. It seems like it's a done deal already at this point. So I haven't looked into much about whether it's worth changing that or not, but it seems to have a lot of support, and I'd be happy to support it as well, except if there's a business case showing that it's terrible.
But again, I hope that you would say that as a central government politician, it's not my decision to meddle in, right? We can share the views of our constituents and advocate for them, but it is not, as central government politicians, it is not up to us, or it shouldn't be up to us.
Well, true, yeah. In a better functioning system, we wouldn't have our hands on the purse strings of this. NZTA would be deciding to grant money according to how good the projects were, and local governments would have their own money which they could put to projects they thought were good, independently of what was good for the country as a whole. Yeah, I agree.
Awesome, thanks. So what's TOP's position on international trade vis-a-vis local trade and economic development?
Oh, that's a big one. I mean, international trade is great, but of course, if we can build our local economy, then that's even better as well. I mean, I would say the big opportunity for New Zealand in terms of economic development, I think, is around making sure that government procurement. We make the most of government procurement, and I think that's a massive opportunity for economic development. For example, we send a whole lot of logs overseas, and wood processing has been really struggling in New Zealand. Well, if we got our act together and we knew within the public sector all of the wood that was going to be bought over the next 10 years, I'm pretty sure we could keep some local wood manufacturers in business, and they'd be able to be competitive. So a lot of this stuff really just takes us being a bit smarter with how we do it, offering some long-term contracts, and just tilting the playing field towards the local producers.
Something I'm
Anyone
really
else?
keen on in
Yeah.
terms of international trade is that I would really like to see us going forwards. Every new trade agreement that we sign has got to have some clause around carbon tariffs in it, so that if a country that we're making a trade agreement has, a good carbon trading scheme or some way of ensuring that they're not making too many emissions, then we can trade with them freely. But that, if they've got pretty poor carbon emission standards and trading schemes, then there'd be sort of a tariff so that we're not forcing our companies to compete on an uneven playing field. And I think that's sort of how it's going to go. It's going to go on these bilateral agreements, and the more of these that we build into it, the more that people that we let into our group, we've got to build these trading alliances where we've said, actually, we want collectively to be lowering our carbon content, and we recognize that we need to hold each other to the same standards to do that. I know that's a bit tangential to the question, but it's something that I'm really, really keen to see more of in our international trade.
Do you think anyone would trade with us on those terms, Ben? I think
we could find people who would be quite willing.
No, I mean, what I mean is they might look at us and go, man, you guys are rubbish with your carbon.
Yeah, what a great incentive for us to lift our game, huh?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's a really good point, Ben. We've got time for one more question, Holly.
Okay, so we do have quite a few questions in the room. I think we'll wrap up the live chat, but could everyone please tell us how we could learn more about you as candidates, how we could get in touch? And then I think a fun question last night was, what's your favourite band?
Oh, wow. Okay, cool. So how can people get in touch with us? I think each of us have our own Facebook pages. I've got a personal Facebook page, Geoff Simmons. I'm on Twitter. I'm on Instagram, and you can email me at leader@top.org.nz. That's fairly straightforward. Favorite band at the moment. If we're talking popular culture, I would say my favorite band at the moment would be Lizzo. I know she's not a band, she's a singer, but she's awesome. Yeah.
All right. I am the world's easiest person to Google. There's like one person with my last name in the entire world. So if you just Google me, you will find me. You will not have trouble doing that. Any way you like, type in Wylie-van Eerd and you find me. Easy. This is going to be a terrible answer, but my favorite band of late has been the Smothers Brothers, which are this comedy folk duo from the States from like the 60s. And I've just been on a real bender of them lately.
Smothers Brothers, I'll look that up.
Smothers Brothers. They got a little bit political, Geoff. You might like them. Talking about President Lyndon Johnson,
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
You can contact me through Facebook or on jessica@top.org.nz. I don't actually listen to very much music. I listen to podcasts almost constantly. But when I do listen to music, I usually listen to like David Bowie or Queen. But lately, because I'm not very good with distractions, I've been listening to a harp player called Mary Lattimore. It's quite good, just like background music.
Wow.
So I can concentrate on stuff.
That's awesome. Hey, but you must have to listen to your daughter's music, Jess.
Oh, we listen to a lot of Billie Eilish and someone Mendes. I don't know. There's a lot of swears in it, and a lot of some of it's really like quite dark.
I have to actually also mention Kiwi artist Marlon Williams. Loving Marlon Williams,
yes. Yeah, me
who's
too.
been on the scene lately. Okay, Abe.
Yeah, I also have a candidate Facebook page, but that's a terrible way to get in touch with me. But I am pretty easily Googleable. If you look up the page for the Cannabis Museum, my phone number and email are widely published in relation to the Cannabis Museum, so I can be reached that way quite easily.
Which is Whakamana, right?
Yeah, Whakamana. Yep. Whakamana. Yeah, favorite band. Geez, I hardly ever listen to music either. I listen to a lot of national radio. I really like reggae and New Zealand reggae from the early 2000s. But yeah, I guess maybe favorite of all time, probably Peter Tosh.
Who's your favorite reggae band from the New Zealand reggae band from the early 2000s?
There was a great reggae band in Dunedin when I first arrived that really encapsulated to me like the festival culture in the US, which I was a big part of, and a lot of my radical politics and cannabis legalization activism comes from those experiences. And the closest thing that I found to like a North American jam band, we used to call them, was this reggae band in Dunedin when I first arrived called Zavuya. But yeah, they're not around anymore. But our Southland candidate, Joel, is actually mates with the former frontman, and they're at a candidate meeting in the Catlins tonight.
Wow, cool. You learn something every day. Okay, hey, well, thanks so much for joining us, Ben and Jess and Abe. I'll see you in about 5 minutes in my lounge to talk cannabis.
I'll see you in about 2.5 minutes before, or well, no, we'll never mind.
And thanks very much to everyone who's helped put this on, Holly and Adam and Josiah. Really appreciate our awesome volunteer team. Kia ora.
Awesome. Thanks so much.